The rain hammered against the cracked pavement of Newark's industrial district like bullets from an invisible gun. Grace Martinez pressed her back against the cold brick wall of the abandoned warehouse, her breath coming in sharp, painful gasps. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, mixing with the rain that soaked through her worn jacket. Her 7-year-old daughter, Emma, was waiting at home with Mrs. Chen, the elderly neighbor who watched her during Grace's night shifts at the diner. Grace had promised to be home by midnight. It was now 1:47 a.m. She hadn't meant to see what she saw. 3 hours earlier, Grace had been walking home through the shortcut behind the old textile factory, a route she'd taken hundreds of times to save 15 minutes on her commute. The factory had been closed for years, a skeletal reminder of Newark's industrial past, now home only to rats and the occasional homeless person seeking shelter. But tonight the loading dock was alive with activity. Black SUVs with tinted windows, men in expensive suits moving crates with military precision. And in the center of it all, she'd glimpsed something that made her blood run cold. Rows of military-grade weapons enough to arm a small army. Grace had frozen, her hand clutching her phone. She should have kept walking. She should have pretended she saw nothing. But her thumb had moved almost involuntarily, snapping a single photograph before her rational mind could stop her. The flash had been off, but the click of the camera shutter in the quiet night had been as loud as a gunshot. Now 2 men were hunting her through the maze of abandoned buildings. She could hear their footsteps echoing off the concrete, their voices low and menacing as they coordinated their search. Grace's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst through her ribcage. She thought of Emma, sweet, innocent Emma with her gap-toothed smile and her obsession with drawing butterflies. Who would take care of her daughter if Grace didn't make it home tonight? She went this way. A gruff voice called out, closer than before. Boss wants this handled quietly, no witnesses, no problems. Grace's fingers trembled as she tried to unlock her phone to call 911, but the screen was shattered from where she'd fallen while running. The device was useless. She was alone, trapped, with no way to call for help. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent the last 3 years carefully building a quiet, invisible life after escaping her abusive ex-husband, Marcus. She'd learned to be nobody, to disappear into the background of everyday life. And now, that invisibility might be the only thing that could save her. She crept along the wall, searching for another exit, another escape route. The warehouse district was a labyrinth of interconnected buildings, but she didn't know the layout well enough to navigate it in the dark. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound made her jump. Grace rounded a corner and nearly screamed. A figure stood blocking her path, but it wasn't one of her pursuers. It was a homeless man she'd seen around the neighborhood before, bundled in layers of tattered clothing, his weathered face barely visible beneath a knit cap. "They're looking for you," he whispered urgently. "Go through the basement access, 2 buildings down. There's a tunnel that leads to the subway maintenance entrance. Go now." Grace wanted to thank him, to ask why he was helping her, but there was no time. She could hear the men's voices growing louder, their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness like searchlights. She ran, her worn sneakers splashing through puddles following the homeless man's directions. The basement access was exactly where he'd said, a rusted metal door that shrieked in protest as she forced it open. The sound echoed through the night, and she heard shouts behind her. They knew where she was now. The basement was pitch black and smelled of mold and decay. Grace used her damaged phone as a makeshift flashlight, the cracked screen casting fragmented beams of light that barely illuminated 3 feet ahead. She stumbled over debris, her hand scraping against rough concrete walls as she searched for the tunnel. Behind her, the basement door crashed open. They were inside. "End of the line, lady," one of the men called out. "Whatever you saw tonight, you're gonna forget it. Permanently." Grace's fingers found the edge of an opening in the wall, the tunnel entrance. She squeezed through, not caring that the rough edges tore at her jacket and scraped her skin. The tunnel was narrow, claustrophobic, with water dripping from rusty pipes overhead. She crawled forward desperately, her breath echoing in the confined space. The men behind her were too large to follow easily through the narrow passage, and she heard them cursing in frustration. She emerged into a wider maintenance corridor, part of the old subway system that had been abandoned decades ago. The air was thick and stale, but there was light ahead, dim emergency lighting that still functioned despite years of neglect. Grace ran toward it, her legs burning with exhaustion, her lungs screaming for air. She could see stairs leading upward, promising escape to the street level. But as she reached the bottom of the stairs, a third man appeared at the top, blocking her exit. He was different from the others, younger, well-dressed in an expensive black coat, his face partially shadowed but radiating an authority that made Grace's stomach drop. He descended the stairs slowly, deliberately, like a predator that knew its prey had nowhere left to run. "That's far enough," he said quietly. His voice was cultured, educated, not what she expected from a thug. "You've caused quite a bit of trouble tonight, miss." Grace backed against the wall, her mind racing for options. There were none. She was cornered, exhausted, and alone. "I didn't see anything," she said, hating the tremor in her voice. "I was just walking home. I won't say anything to anyone. Please, I have a daughter." "Everyone has someone," the man interrupted, moving closer. "That's what makes these situations so complicated." He studied her face with disturbing intensity, as if memorizing every feature. "You have blood on your face. Who did that to you?" The question caught Grace off guard. Of all the things she'd expected him to say, concern for her injuries wasn't one of them. She touched her lips self-consciously, feeling the split where one of his men had struck her when she'd first tried to run. "Your guys did," she said bitterly. "When they caught me the first time." The man's expression darkened instantly. He turned slightly, and Grace realized the two men who'd been chasing her had emerged from the tunnel behind her. She was now trapped between all three of them with no escape route. The well-dressed man's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Which one of you touched her?" The question hung in the air like a blade. The two thugs exchanged nervous glances. "Boss, she was running," one of them started to explain. "We had to stop her before." "I asked which one of you touched her," the man repeated, each word precisely articulated. "Answer me now." Grace watched in confusion and growing dread as one of the men, a stocky guy with a shaved head and a scar across his cheek, reluctantly raised his hand. "It was just a tap, Mr. Dante, to stop her from—" The man called Mr. Dante moved so quickly that Grace barely registered what happened. One moment he was standing calmly. The next, the scarred thug was on the ground, blood pouring from his nose, groaning in pain. Dante stood over him, his expensive shoes planted firmly on either side of the man's chest, his voice cold as ice. "We don't hit women. We don't hit civilians who accidentally see something they shouldn't. And we definitely don't leave marks on someone's face like she's a criminal when she's just trying to get home to her daughter." He looked back at Grace, and she saw something unexpected in his dark eyes, genuine anger on her behalf. "Are you hurt anywhere else?" Grace couldn't speak. Her mind couldn't process what was happening. This man was clearly the leader of whoever was running that weapons operation, yet he was defending her against his own men. It made no sense. Nothing about this night made sense anymore. Dante pulled out his phone and made a call, his eyes never leaving Grace's face. "Marcus, it's Dante. Get to the old subway maintenance entrance on Harrison Street, now, and bring Dr. Chen with you." He ended the call and took a step toward Grace, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I'm not going to hurt you. Neither is anyone else. But we need to talk about what you saw tonight, and we need to make sure you're okay first. Will you trust me for just a few minutes?" "Why?" Grace whispered. "Why do you care if I'm hurt?" Dante's expression flickered with something that might have been pain or memory. Grace couldn't tell which. "Because," he said quietly, "my mother looked like you do right now once. Scared, cornered, bleeding. And the man who did that to her didn't ask if she was okay. He just kept hurting her." He held out his hand. "I'm not that man, and I won't let my people be that man either. So I'm asking you again, who hurt you? Who gave you that fear I see in your eyes even before tonight?" Grace found herself answering before she could stop herself. "My ex-husband, Marcus Sullivan, he found me 2 months ago. He's been following me, threatening me, saying he'll take Emma away if I don't come back to him." The words poured out like water from a broken dam. "I left him 3 years ago after he broke 2 of my ribs and told me next time he'd kill me. I changed my name, moved here, got a job at the diner on Fletcher Street. I've been trying so hard to stay invisible, to keep Emma safe. And now this? Now you." She broke down then, the terror and exhaustion of the night finally overwhelming her carefully maintained composure. Grace slid down the wall sobbing, her whole body shaking. She'd held it together for so long, through the divorce proceedings, the restraining order that Marcus had violated, the constant looking over her shoulder, the nightmares that woke her at 3 a.m. drenched in sweat, and now, in front of a crime boss in an abandoned subway tunnel, she finally fell apart. Dante knelt beside her, keeping a respectful distance but close enough that she could hear his quiet voice. "Grace Martinez, formerly Grace Sullivan," he said, and she looked up sharply. wondering how he knew her old name. He saw her expression and smiled slightly. Your ex used his credit card at a bar on Fletcher Street 3 weeks ago. He's not as careful as he thinks he is. I know about him because I know everything that happens in my city. And I know about you because you're one of 3 single mothers who work night shifts at that diner. And you're the only one who takes the shortcut through my warehouse district. Are you going to kill me? Grace asked bluntly, too exhausted for fear anymore. No, Dante said simply. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer honestly. Do you want Marcus Sullivan to ever hurt you or your daughter again? Grace met his eyes, seeing her own reflection in those dark depths. A broken, bleeding woman who'd been running for too long. No, she whispered. Never again. Dante stood and offered his hand again. This time, Grace took it. He pulled her to her feet gently, steadying her when she swayed from exhaustion. Then we have something in common, he said, because I don't want him hurting you either. And in this city, what I want tends to happen. He looked at his 2 remaining men. The one he'd knocked down was still groaning on the ground. Take him to Dr. Reeves for his nose. Then find Marcus Sullivan. Bring him to me tomorrow night at the usual place. Don't hurt him yet. Just bring him in. Boss, one of the men said hesitantly. What about the photos she took, the shipment? Dante pulled out Grace's shattered phone from his pocket. She hadn't even realized he'd taken it from her. This phone is destroyed. No photos can be recovered from it. And Miss Martinez here? He looked at Grace with an expression she couldn't quite read. She's going to forget everything she saw tonight. Because she knows that if she ever mentions what happened at that warehouse to anyone, police, reporters, anyone, then I can't protect her from the people who would rather see her silent permanently. Isn't that right, Grace? Grace understood immediately. This was the deal. Her silence for her safety. And for the first time in 3 years, she felt something other than constant fear. She felt protected. It was a dangerous feeling, she knew. This man was a criminal. He dealt in weapons and God knows what else. But in this moment, he was offering her something the police never could. The promise that Marcus would never touch her again. I didn't see anything, Grace said clearly. I was never here. And tomorrow night, when you have your conversation with Marcus, I hope you make him understand that my daughter and I are off limits. Forever. Dante smiled. A genuine smile that transformed his face from intimidating to almost handsome. I think Marcus and I will come to a very clear understanding, he said. Then his expression turned serious again. But there's one more thing. The question I asked you before, who hurt you? That answer is going to spread through this city by morning. Everyone in my organization, everyone who does business with me, everyone who lives in the neighborhoods I control, they're all going to know that Grace Martinez is under my personal protection. Do you understand what that means? Grace shook her head, not daring to hope. It means you're not invisible anymore, Dante said quietly. It means that by tomorrow the entire city will know exactly who you are, and that knowledge might save your life or it might complicate it in ways you can't imagine yet. But either way, you won't be running anymore. You'll be standing still, and the world will move around you instead. Can you handle that? Grace thought of Emma waiting at home. She thought of 3 years of looking over her shoulder, of taking the long way home to avoid Marcus's favorite bars, of lying to her daughter about why they couldn't go to the park or the library or anywhere Marcus might find them. She thought of being small and scared and invisible for so long that she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to exist in the world as a real person. Yes, she said firmly. I can handle that. Dante nodded once, a gesture of respect between equals. Then let's get you home to your daughter. And tomorrow the whole city learns who hurt Grace Martinez. And then we make sure he never hurts anyone again. As they climbed the stairs together and emerged onto the rain-slicked streets of Newark, Grace realized that everything in her life had just changed. The question, who hurt you, had opened a door she couldn't close. And whatever waited on the other side, she would face it standing tall instead of running scared. The rain had stopped, and the city lights reflected off the wet pavement like scattered stars. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Grace took a deep breath of the cool night air and, for the first time in years, didn't flinch at the sound. Her invisible life was over. Her real life was about to begin. Grace woke to the sound of her phone ringing. The new phone that had appeared on her doorstep at 6 a.m. with a simple note. Your old one was broken. This one is secure. D. She'd been too exhausted to question it. Too drained from the night's events to do anything but collapse into bed after checking on Emma. Now, as weak sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of their small apartment, Reality crashed back over her like a wave. It was Mrs. Chen calling. Grace answered groggily. "Hello? Grace, dear, don't come outside yet." The elderly woman's voice was tight with concern. "There are people in the street. They've been standing there since dawn." Grace's heart plummeted. She crept to the window and carefully pulled back the curtain just enough to see. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. 3 black SUVs were parked along the curb outside her building, the same kind she'd seen at the warehouse, but the men standing beside them weren't threatening or aggressive. They were simply there, watching, waiting. 2 of them were even holding coffee cups like this was just another Tuesday morning. "Oh God," Grace whispered. "Emma is fine, is safe," Mrs. Chen interrupted quickly. "I have her here. We're making pancakes. But Grace, there's something else. Turn on the television. Channel 7 News." Grace's hands trembled as she grabbed the remote. Channel 7 was already showing a breaking news segment. The headline scrolling across the bottom made her stomach drop. "Mysterious woman at center of Newark crime investigation." The news anchor, a polished woman in her 40s named Diane Crawford, spoke with barely contained excitement. "We're following a developing story this morning about a woman named Grace Martinez, a single mother working at Fletcher's Diner, who has allegedly come under the protection of Newark's most elusive crime figure, known only as Dante Moretti. Sources close to the situation report that last night, Martinez witnessed something that put her life in danger, leading to a confrontation that has sent shockwaves through the city's criminal underworld. Grace felt like she couldn't breathe. They were using her name, her real name, on television, for everyone to see." The segment continued with footage of Fletcher's Diner, where Grace had worked for 2 years. The reporter standing outside looked thrilled. Martinez's co-workers describe her as quiet, hard-working, and devoted to her 7-year-old daughter Emma. But as of this morning, Grace Martinez has become one of the most talked-about women in Newark. Not for what she did, but for the question that was asked about her. Our sources indicate that Dante Moretti himself asked, "Who hurt you?" And that question has become a rallying cry in certain communities where violence against women has long been an open secret. Grace sank onto her worn couch, her mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. Dante had warned her that her name would spread, but she hadn't imagined anything like this. The news segment showed social media posts already circulating with the hashtag, #WhoHurtYou, with women sharing their own stories of abuse and survival. Grace's face, pulled from her driver's license photo, was being shared thousands of times. Her new phone rang again. Unknown number. Grace almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Miss Martinez." The voice was smooth, professional, female. "My name is Catherine Park. I'm an attorney with Morrison & Associates. I've been retained to represent you in any legal matters that may arise from last night's incident. I'll be arriving at your apartment in 20 minutes with breakfast and a comprehensive security briefing. Please don't be alarmed by the men outside. They're there for your protection." "Who hired you?" Grace demanded. "I can't afford—" "Your retainer has been paid in full," Catherine interrupted gently, "along with 6 months of your rent, a college fund for Emma, and a trust that will ensure your financial security. Mr. Moretti was quite specific about his instructions. You're not to worry about money anymore. You're to focus on staying safe and taking care of your daughter." Grace wanted to protest, to refuse, to maintain some shred of independence. But the practical part of her brain, the part that had kept her and Emma alive through 3 years of poverty and fear, was already calculating what this meant. No more double shifts. No more choosing between Emma's new shoes and the electric bill. No more terror every time Marcus's name appeared in her phone's blocked calls list. "Why?" Grace asked quietly. "Why is he doing this?" Catherine was silent for a moment. "That's a question you'll have to ask him yourself. He's requested a meeting with you this afternoon if you're willing. But there's something you need to understand, Miss Martinez. As of this morning, you're not just a witness or a victim anymore. You've become a symbol, and symbols are powerful, but they're also dangerous. There are people who will want to use you and others who will want to silence you. My job is to make sure neither happens." After Catherine hung up, Grace sat in stunned silence. A symbol. She'd spent 3 years trying to be invisible, and now she was a symbol. The irony was almost funny. Except nothing about this situation was funny. Emma's voice called from the phone Grace had left near the window. She'd butt-dialed Mrs. Chen, and now she could hear her daughter's innocent chatter in the background. "Mrs. Chen, why are there so many cars outside? Are they here for Mommy?" Grace closed her eyes against the tears that threatened. This was the price of protection. Exposure. Dante had been right when he said her life would get complicated. She just hadn't realized how quickly it would happen. Exactly 20 minutes later, there was a knock on her door. Grace checked the peephole and saw a woman in an expensive charcoal suit, holding a briefcase in one hand and a bag from an upscale bakery in the other. Behind her stood one of the men from the SUVs, his expression professionally neutral. Grace opened the door. Catherine Park was petite, maybe 5'2", with sharp eyes behind designer glasses and an air of absolute competence. She stepped inside, and the security guard remained in the hallway without being asked. "You look like you need coffee," Catherine said, unpacking the bakery bag on Grace's small kitchen table. "And information. Let's start with both." Over coffee and croissants that cost more than Grace usually spent on groceries for a week, Catherine laid out the situation with brutal efficiency. First, the basics. Marcus Sullivan was picked up at 3 a.m. this morning by Mr. Moretti's people. He's alive and unharmed, but he's been educated about the consequences of coming near you or Emma ever again. The restraining order you filed last year has been reinforced with additional documentation, and I've already filed motions to have his parental rights permanently terminated based on his history of domestic violence. Grace's hand shook as she set down her coffee cup. "You did all that already? It's only 8 in the morning." Catherine smiled slightly. "I don't sleep much and I have an excellent paralegal team. Now, the complications. Senator Jonathan Hayes has taken an interest in your case." "The Senator Hayes?" Grace asked, stunned. "The one running for governor?" "The same. He's built his campaign on fighting corruption and organized crime. Your situation presents him with an interesting dilemma. You were saved by the very criminals he's pledged to eliminate. He called my office an hour ago requesting a meeting with you. He wants to offer you witness protection through a federal program in exchange for testimony about what you saw at the warehouse." Grace's blood ran cold. "But I told Dante I wouldn't say anything. That was the deal." "I know," Catherine said carefully. "And that puts you in a very delicate position. Senator Hayes can be persistent. He sees you as a potential key witness who could help him take down Moretti's entire operation. But if you cooperate with Hayes, you lose Moretti's protection, and possibly your life. The people who own those weapons you saw last night don't forgive witnesses. So I'm trapped," Grace said bitterly, "between a crime boss and a senator." "Not trapped," Catherine corrected. "Protected by one and wanted by the other. There's a difference. My advice? Meet with Senator Hayes, listen to what he has to say, but make no commitments. Meanwhile, Mr. Moretti has requested that you meet him this afternoon at a neutral location, a restaurant called Luciano's on Broad Street. He wants to explain the full situation and give you choices about how to proceed." Grace laughed without humor. "Choices? I haven't had real choices in years." Catherine's expression softened slightly. "I know your history, Grace. I know what Marcus did to you, how you've been living. But things are different now. Yes, you're exposed. Yes, there are risks. But you also have resources you've never had before. Legal representation, financial security, physical protection, and most importantly, you have leverage. Both Moretti and Hayes want something from you. That means you're not powerless. You just need to learn how to use the power you have." The words settled over Grace like a new skin, uncomfortable but potentially protective. She'd spent so long being a victim that she'd forgotten what it felt like to have any agency at all. Maybe Catherine was right. Maybe this exposure, terrifying as it was, could actually be turned into something that gave her control over her own life for the first time in years. "Tell Senator Hayes I'll meet with him," Grace decided. "But not today. I need time to understand what I'm dealing with first. And tell Mr. Moretti I'll come to Luciano's at 2 o'clock. Catherine nodded approvingly. "Smart. Don't make decisions when you're overwhelmed. Gather information first, then decide." She pulled several documents from her briefcase. "These are for you to review before the meeting. Background on Moretti's organization, Senator Hayes' campaign platform, and a summary of New Jersey's witness protection programs. Read them carefully. Knowledge is power, Grace. And right now, you need all the power you can get." After Catherine left, Grace spent the next 3 hours reading every word of the documents while Emma played happily at Mrs. Chen's apartment, blissfully unaware of how much their lives had changed overnight. The information was overwhelming. Detailed accounts of Moretti's criminal empire, which controlled everything from legitimate businesses to weapons trafficking, alongside equally detailed reports of Senator Hayes' 15-year crusade to clean up Newark's corruption. But what struck Grace most was a small note Catherine had paperclipped to the Moretti file. His mother, Maria Moretti, was murdered by her husband when Dante was 12 years old. The police classified it as domestic violence. No one was ever charged. This is why he asked you about who hurt you. This is personal for him. Grace stared at that note for a long time. Dante Moretti wasn't just a crime boss offering random protection. He was a man who'd watched his mother die and had spent his life making sure other women didn't suffer the same fate. It didn't excuse his criminal activities. Grace wasn't naive enough to romanticize him, but it explained them. He was protecting her because no one had protected his mother. At 1:30 p.m., Grace dressed in her best outfit, a simple navy dress that she usually saved for Emma's school events, and prepared to meet the man who had turned her life upside down in less than 24 hours. One of the security guards, a surprisingly young man named Tommy who couldn't be older than 25, escorted her to one of the black SUVs. "Is Mr. Moretti scary?" Grace asked as they drove through Newark streets. She noticed people staring at the SUV, pointing. Word had definitely spread. Tommy glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Depends on who you are. If you're loyal and honest with him, he's the best boss in the world. If you cross him or hurt someone he protects." He paused significantly. "Let's just say, Marcus Sullivan is very lucky that Mr. Moretti values keeping his word to you about not hurting him too badly." "What happened to Marcus?" Grace needed to know. "He's alive," Tommy said carefully. "He's uninjured, but he's been made to understand very clearly that if he ever comes within 100 yards of you or Emma, the consequences will be permanent. Mr. Moretti arranged for Marcus to take a job in Seattle. He leaves tomorrow on a flight that's already been booked for him. He won't be coming back." Grace felt something loosen in her chest. A knot of fear she'd carried for 3 years suddenly untangling. Marcus was leaving. For real. Not just restraining order leaving, where he still lurked in the same city, but actually leaving New Jersey entirely. She could walk down the street without constantly checking over her shoulder. Emma could play in the park without Grace panicking every time she saw a tall man in the distance. "Thank you," Grace whispered. "Tell Mr. Moretti thank you." Tommy smiled at her through the mirror. "You can tell him yourself. We're here." Luciano's was an elegant Italian restaurant in Newark's downtown, the kind of place Grace had walked past 100 times but never dreamed of entering. As Tommy opened her door, she saw Dante Moretti waiting at the entrance, dressed in an impeccably tailored dark suit. In the daylight, without the rain and fear and darkness of their first meeting, he looked different, younger than she'd thought, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. He smiled when he saw her, a genuine expression that transformed his face. "Grace, thank you for coming. I promise this conversation will answer some of your questions, and probably create new ones." He offered his arm like an old-fashioned gentleman. "Shall we?" Grace took his arm, aware that somewhere nearby, cameras were probably photographing this moment. The invisible single mother from the diner, walking into an expensive restaurant on the arm of Newark's most notorious crime boss. By tonight, it would be all over the news again. But as they entered Luciano's, and Dante guided her to a private dining room where they could talk without being overheard, Grace realized something important. She wasn't scared anymore. Not of Dante, not of the attention, not even of whatever came next. For the first time in years, she was curious about her own future instead of terrified of it. And that tiny spark of curiosity felt like the beginning of something she'd almost forgotten existed. It felt like hope. The private dining room at Luciano's was nothing like Grace had imagined. Instead of dark, intimidating decor, the space was warm and elegantly lit, with cream-colored walls adorned with tasteful paintings of the Italian countryside. A single table sat in the center, already set with fine china and crystal glasses. But what struck Grace most was the complete absence of bodyguards or enforcers. It was just her and Dante, sitting across from each other like two ordinary people about to share a meal. "I asked for privacy," Dante explained, noticing her surprise. "What we discuss today needs to be honest, and honest conversations don't happen when you're worried about who's listening." He poured water into her glass with careful precision. "I imagine you have questions. Many questions. So before I explain anything, why don't you ask me what you really want to know?" Grace took a sip of water, buying herself a moment to think. There were 100 things she wanted to ask, but one question rose above all the others. "Why me?" she said finally. "I know about your mother. My lawyer told me. I understand that what happened to her makes this personal for you, but there are thousands of women in this city dealing with abusive partners. Why did you decide to protect me specifically? Why am I sitting here instead of in a witness protection program or worse?" Dante leaned back in his chair, studying her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "Because you ran," he said simply. "When my men chased you, you didn't freeze or beg or try to negotiate. You ran. You fought to survive. You used every advantage you could find. That homeless man who helped you, the tunnel system, your knowledge of the streets. You didn't give up even when you were cornered and terrified." He paused and something flickered across his face. "My mother didn't run. She stayed because she thought she had no choice. She believed my father when he said he'd find her anywhere she went, that she couldn't protect me if she left, so she stayed. And she died in that house while I hid in a closet and listened." The rawness in his voice made Grace's throat tighten. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "No child should ever witness that." "No," Dante agreed quietly. "And no woman should have to run through abandoned buildings in the rain, bleeding and terrified, because she accidentally saw something she shouldn't have. When I found you in that tunnel, Grace, I saw my mother. But I also saw the woman she could have been if someone had offered her a way out. So I'm offering you what no one offered her. Choice. Real choice. Not the illusion of it." A waiter appeared with plates of food, delicate pasta dishes that smelled incredible. Grace realized she hadn't eaten anything substantial since yesterday's shift at the diner. As they began to eat, Dante continued speaking, his tone shifting from emotional to businesslike. "Here's the situation as it stands right now. You witnessed a weapons shipment that belongs to an organization I do business with, the Castellano family from Brooklyn. They're old school, traditional, and extremely paranoid about witnesses. Under normal circumstances, you'd already be dead. The only reason you're not is because I claimed you under my personal protection within an hour of our meeting. In our world, that's an unbreakable covenant. No one touches you without declaring war on me." Grace set down her fork, her appetite suddenly gone. "So I'm alive because you made me your responsibility." "Yes," Dante said bluntly, "but that protection comes with complications. Senator Jonathan Hayes has been trying to build a case against me for 3 years. He's gotten close a few times, but never close enough. Now you're a potential witness to a federal crime, illegal weapons trafficking across state lines. If Hayes can convince you to testify, he could dismantle my entire organization, and possibly the Castellanos as well. That would make him the hero who cleaned up Newark, almost certainly guaranteeing his election as governor. And if I refuse to testify, then Hayes will try other methods, subpoenas, pressure. He might even try to have you arrested as an accessory if he's desperate enough. The man is brilliant and ruthless, and he genuinely believes he's fighting for justice. In many ways, he's right. I'm a criminal, Grace. I break laws, I profit from illegal activities, and I've hurt people who threaten my interests. I'm not going to pretend otherwise or try to make you see me as some kind of romantic anti-hero. I'm exactly what Hayes says I am." Grace stared at him, shocked by his honesty. "Then why are you telling me this? Why not just keep me isolated and controlled until the threat passes?" Dante smiled slightly. "Because you're not my prisoner. You're under my protection, which is different. I meant what I said about giving you choices. So here they are, laid out clearly. Option 1. You cooperate with Senator Hayes. You testify about what you saw, enter witness protection, and disappear with Emma. You get a new identity, a new life, complete safety from Marcus and from anyone in my world who might want to silence you. Hayes would ensure your protection personally. He's not corrupt, just determined. What's the catch? The catch is that witness protection means isolation. No contact with anyone from your old life, not Mrs. Chen, not your co-workers, not the community you've built here. You'd be safe, but you'd also be alone in a strange city, starting over again with even less than you had when you ran from Marcus. And there's always the chance that someone from the Castellano family finds you anyway. Witness protection isn't perfect." Grace absorbed this, her mind racing through the implications. "What's option 2? Option 2 is you stay under my protection. You refuse to cooperate with Hayes. You maintain your silence about what you saw, and in exchange I guarantee your safety and Emma's safety for as long as I'm alive and in power. You get to keep your life here in Newark, your apartment, your community. The financial support continues, not as payment for silence, but because I take care of people I protect. You'd never have to worry about money or Marcus or anyone else threatening you again. And the catch there?" Dante's expression grew serious. "The catch is that you become permanently associated with me in the public eye. You're already halfway there. The news coverage this morning made sure of that. If you stay under my protection, you'll be seen as connected to organized crime, whether you are or not. That might affect Emma's life, her friendships, her opportunities. People will judge you. Some will assume you're my mistress or that you're complicit in my activities. It's not fair, but it's reality. Grace felt like she was standing at a crossroads with no map. Both paths led to uncertain destinations. Both carried risks she couldn't fully calculate. "Is there an option 3? She asked, half hoping, half knowing the answer. "No," Dante said gently. "There's no middle ground here, Grace. You're too visible now, too important to too many people's plans. You have to choose a side, even if you don't want to be on any side at all. That's the price of survival in my world. Everything comes down to choices and loyalties." They ate in silence for a few minutes, the weight of the decision hanging between them. Finally, Grace spoke again. "Tell me about Senator Hayes. Is he really as clean as everyone says? Because in my experience, nobody gets that much power without compromising somewhere." Dante's eyes lit with something like respect. "Smart question. Yes, Hayes is genuinely clean, almost uniquely so in modern politics. He inherited family money, so he's not beholden to donors. He's never taken a bribe, never accepted a favor that would compromise him. His wife died of cancer 5 years ago, and he has no children, which means he has no vulnerabilities someone like me could exploit. He's essentially incorruptible, which makes him extremely dangerous to people in my position. But you don't hate him," Grace observed, hearing something in Dante's tone. "No," Dante admitted. "I respect him, actually. If I were a civilian, I'd probably vote for him. He wants to make Newark safer, cleaner, better for ordinary people. The problem is that his vision of a better city doesn't have room for people like me, or for the complicated realities of how power actually works in places like this. He sees everything in black and white, good and evil. He doesn't understand that sometimes people need the gray areas to survive." Grace thought about her own life, the gray areas she'd navigated to keep Emma safe, the times she'd lied to social workers or landlords or employers to maintain their precarious existence. "I understand gray areas," she said quietly. "I've lived in them for 3 years." "I know," Dante said. "That's another reason I'm giving you this choice instead of making it for you. You understand nuance. You understand that survival sometimes means making deals with people you wouldn't choose to know in a perfect world." He leaned forward slightly. "But here's what you need to understand about Senator Hayes. He'll promise you safety and justice and a fresh start. And he'll mean every word. He's not lying or manipulating when he makes those offers. But his protection only lasts as long as his political power does. If he loses his Senate seat, or if he fails to become governor, or if some scandal derails his career, then you're out there alone with nothing but a new identity and the enemies you made by testifying. While your protection is based on personal loyalty and organizational structure. As long as I'm alive and leading this organization, you're untouchable. If something happens to me, my second in command already has instructions to maintain your protection. It's written into the organization's codes. You're not dependent on one man's political career. You're protected by an entire system." Grace pushed her plate away, her stomach churning with anxiety. "This is insane. 2 days ago, my biggest worry was whether I could afford new winter boots for Emma. Now I'm choosing between a senator and a crime boss, and either choice could get me killed." "Welcome to my world," Dante said with dark humor. "Though I should point out that you're far less likely to get killed now than you were when you were invisible, and Marcus was stalking you. At least now you have people watching your back. People who traffic weapons," Grace shot back, then immediately regretted her tone. But Dante didn't look offended. "Yes," he agreed calmly. "People who traffic weapons, run protection rackets, and operate outside the law. I'm not asking you to approve of what I do, Grace. I'm asking you to make a practical decision about your survival and Emma's future. Morality is a luxury you can contemplate once you're safe. Right now, you need to focus on which option actually keeps you alive." Before Grace could respond, Dante's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression darkened instantly. "Excuse me for one moment," he said, standing and stepping toward the corner of the room. Grace couldn't hear his conversation, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened as he listened to whoever was on the other end. When he returned to the table, his entire demeanor had changed. The thoughtful, almost gentle man she'd been talking to was gone, replaced by someone harder and infinitely more dangerous. "We need to leave. Now." "What's wrong?" "Senator Hayes just held a press conference. He announced that he has a witness in protective custody who can testify to weapons trafficking in Newark. And he specifically mentioned that this witness was recently threatened by criminal organizations. He didn't use your name, but everyone already knows who he's talking about because of this morning's news coverage. Grace's blood ran cold, but I haven't agreed to anything. I haven't even met with him yet. He knows that, Dante said grimly, already moving toward the door. This is a pressure tactic. By publicly claiming you're cooperating, he's forcing you to either confirm it or deny it. If you confirm, you're committed to his side. If you deny, you look like you're protecting criminals. Either way, he's controlling the narrative. They moved quickly through the restaurant's back exit where Tommy was already waiting with the SUV, engine running. As Grace climbed into the back seat, Dante beside her, she saw news vans pulling up to the front of Luciano's. They'd been followed or tipped off. She wasn't sure which. "Take us to the safe house on Maple Street," Dante ordered Tommy. Then he turned to Grace. "I'm sorry. I wanted to give you time to make this decision carefully, but Hayes just accelerated the timeline. Now you need to choose, Grace. Tonight. Because by tomorrow morning the entire city will be watching to see which side you're on." Grace's hands were shaking. Everything was moving too fast, spiraling out of control. "I need to see Emma first. I need to make sure she's okay." "She's fine," Dante assured her. "I had my people bring her and Mrs. Chen to the safe house an hour ago. I was hoping to avoid needing it, but I always plan for contingencies. Emma thinks it's an adventure. Mrs. Chen told her they're staying in a special hotel for a few days." The safe house turned out to be a beautiful brownstone in one of Newark's historic neighborhoods. The kind of place Grace had fantasized about living in, but never dreamed she could afford. Inside it was furnished comfortably but not ostentatiously, clearly a place meant for actual use rather than showing off wealth. Emma ran to Grace the moment she walked in, wrapping her small arms around her mother's waist. "Mommy, Mrs. Chen says we're on a special trip. There's a huge TV and they have all the Disney movies and the kitchen has every kind of snack." Grace held her daughter tight, breathing in the familiar scent of Emma's strawberry shampoo. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Are you having fun?" "So much fun. Can we stay here forever?" Over Emma's head, Grace met Dante's eyes. That question, "Can we stay here forever?" suddenly seemed to carry enormous weight. Could they? Was this safe, comfortable life something Grace could actually accept? Or was she making a deal with the devil, trading one kind of danger for another? Mrs. Chen appeared from the kitchen looking worried but trying to hide it. "Grace, dear, the news is saying such strange things. Are you in some kind of trouble?" "I'm okay." Grace lied automatically, the way she'd been lying for years to protect people from worrying about her. "Everything's going to be fine." But as she said it, Grace realized she had no idea if that was true. Senator Hayes was playing political chess with her life. Dante Moretti had made her a protected symbol of something she barely understood. And somewhere out there, people who trafficked weapons were probably discussing whether she was worth the trouble of killing despite Dante's protection. The walls were closing in, and Grace needed to make a choice that would determine not just her future, but Emma's future as well. Stay visible and protected but forever marked as connected to crime, or disappear into witness protection, safe but isolated from everything and everyone she knew. Dante stepped outside to make phone calls, giving Grace space to think. She sat with Emma, watching her daughter color in a princess coloring book, completely oblivious to the storm swirling around them. This innocent child who drew butterflies and believed in happy endings. She was the reason Grace had run from Marcus in the first place. She was the reason Grace had survived 3 years of poverty and fear. And she was the reason Grace had to choose wisely now. "Mommy, why do you look sad?" Emma asked, setting down her crayon. "I'm not sad, baby. I'm just thinking." "About what?" Grace smiled, touching Emma's soft cheek. "About how much I love you. And about how I'm going to keep you safe no matter what." "I'm already safe, Mommy," Emma said with the absolute certainty of childhood. "You're here, and Mr. Dante seems really nice. He told me I could pick any toy I wanted from the store tomorrow. Can I get the new Lego set?" Grace's eyes burned with unshed tears. Emma had no idea that Mr. Dante was a criminal, that this special hotel was a safe house, that the special trip might become their permanent reality. Her daughter's innocence was both a blessing and a burden. It meant Emma could be happy anywhere, but it also meant Grace bore the full weight of their decisions alone. When Dante returned an hour later, his expression was grave. "Senator Hayes is giving a follow-up interview at 9 o'clock tonight. He's going to be asked directly if you're cooperating with his investigation. Whatever answer he gives will force your hand. If he says yes, you'll have to publicly deny it or accept it. If he says no, he loses the leverage he just created. Either way, the game ends tonight." Grace stood, gently extracting herself from Emma, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder. She laid her daughter on the plush couch and covered her with a soft blanket. Then she turned to face Dante with a determination she didn't entirely feel, but desperately needed to project. "I've made my decision," Grace said quietly. "But before I tell you what it is, I need you to promise me something. Name it. If I choose to stay under your protection, Emma never learns what you really do. She never sees violence, never witnesses anything that would traumatize her or make her afraid. She gets to be a normal kid with a normal childhood, even if that's a carefully constructed illusion. Can you promise me that?" Dante met her eyes steadily. "I promise. Emma will be protected from everything, including the truth about me, until she's old enough to understand nuance and make her own judgments. Is that acceptable?" Grace took a deep breath. The choice was made. Now she just had to live with it. "I'm staying," she said firmly. "I'm not testifying against you or anyone else. I'm not going into witness protection. I'm staying in Newark, under your protection, and I'm building a real life here for Emma and me. Senator Hayes can say whatever he wants at his press conference tonight. My answer is no." Dante nodded slowly, and something like relief crossed his features. "You're sure? Once you make this public, there's no going back." "I've never been more sure of anything," Grace said. And as she spoke, she realized it was true. She was tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of being invisible and powerless. If being visible and protected meant accepting help from a criminal, then so be it. At least this criminal had asked who hurt her before offering that help. At least Dante Moretti saw her as a person worth protecting, not just a witness worth using. "Then we should prepare a statement," Dante said. "When Hayes names you tonight, you'll need to respond immediately with your own press conference. Catherine is already drafting language, but you'll need to approve it and deliver it yourself. The city needs to hear directly from you that you're refusing to cooperate with the investigation." Grace felt a flutter of panic. "A press conference? I've never spoken in public before. I can't." "You can," Dante interrupted gently. "You're stronger than you think, Grace. You survived Marcus. You escaped my men. You're surviving this. Speaking to cameras is nothing compared to what you've already endured." As they began preparing for what would become the most important speech of Grace's life, she looked back at Emma sleeping peacefully on the couch. Her daughter was dreaming of toys and princesses, safe and loved and protected, and Grace would do whatever it took to keep her that way, even if it meant standing in front of the entire city and declaring her loyalty to a man the world called a criminal, even if it meant becoming a symbol instead of invisible, even if it meant her name would forever be linked to the question that had changed everything. Who hurt you? Grace Martinez was about to give the city her answer, and nothing would ever be the same. The press conference was scheduled for 9:45 p.m., exactly 15 minutes after Senator Hayes' interview would end. Catherine Park had chosen the timing deliberately. "You need to respond immediately," she'd explained while helping Grace prepare. "If you wait until tomorrow, Hayes controls the narrative overnight. But if you speak within minutes of his interview, you create a competing story that the media has to cover equally." Now Grace stood in a small room adjacent to the ballroom of the Marriott Hotel on Broad Street, staring at her reflection in a full-length mirror. Catherine had brought a professional stylist who'd done Grace's hair and makeup. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make her look polished and confident on camera. She wore a simple charcoal dress that Catherine had procured from somewhere, paired with minimal jewelry. The overall effect was of someone serious and credible, not a victim to be pitied or a criminal to be feared. "You look perfect," Catherine said, reviewing notes on her tablet. "Remember what we practiced. Keep your answers short and direct. Don't get emotional, don't get defensive, and whatever you do, don't let them bait you into saying anything negative about Senator Hayes personally. He's not your enemy. You just disagree with his approach to your situation." Grace's hands wouldn't stop trembling. Through the closed door, she could hear the murmur of the assembled press corps. At least 50 reporters had shown up on 90 minutes' notice, a testament to how big this story had become. Somewhere in that crowd was Diane Crawford from Channel 7, whose morning broadcast had started this media frenzy. Somewhere out there were people who would judge every word Grace spoke, who would analyze her facial expressions and tone of voice, looking for signs of coercion or deception. Dante appeared in the doorway, and the security guard stepped aside immediately. He'd changed into a different suit, midnight blue this time, and looked every inch the powerful businessman rather than the crime boss. 5 minutes, he said quietly. "Are you ready?" "No," Grace admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." He smiled at that. That's the definition of courage, doing what needs to be done even when you're terrified. He crossed the room and stood beside her at the mirror, their reflections side by side. You don't have to do this, Grace. Even now, at this last moment, you can change your mind. I can have Catherine cancel the press conference, put you and Emma on a plane tonight to anywhere in the world you want to go. You can disappear, start over somewhere Hayes and the Castellanos will never find you. Grace met his eyes in the mirror. Is that what you want me to do? What I want is irrelevant, Dante said carefully. This is your life, your choice. I meant what I said about giving you options. But if I run now after Hayes just announced I'm cooperating with him, what happens to you? Dante's expression didn't change, but Grace saw something flicker in his eyes. I'll manage. I always do. Don't make this decision based on protecting me, Grace. I've been in this game long enough to handle whatever Hayes throws at me. Grace turned away from the mirror to face him directly. That's not an answer. Tell me the truth. If I disappear tonight, does Hayes use my absence as evidence that you've silenced me? Does it give him the excuse he needs to come after you harder? There was a long pause. Finally, Dante nodded. Yes. If you vanish now, Hayes will claim I either killed you or forced you into hiding. He'll use it to justify aggressive action against my organization, raids, arrests, asset seizures. He won't be able to prove anything without your testimony, but he can make life extremely difficult. Some of my people will end up in jail on lesser charges. Some of my legitimate businesses will be destroyed by investigations. It won't topple my organization, but it will hurt a lot of people who depend on me. People like Tommy, the security guard who's been protecting me? Yes, people like Tommy. Grace absorbed this. Her choice wasn't just about her own safety anymore. It rippled outward, affecting dozens or maybe hundreds of people she'd never met. The weight of that responsibility should have crushed her, but instead, it clarified things. She thought about Tommy, who'd been kind and professional. She thought about Catherine, who'd worked through the night on her behalf. She thought about the homeless man who'd helped her escape through the tunnels, who probably worked for Dante in some capacity. These weren't abstract criminals. They were real people with real lives, and Grace's decision would impact all of them. Then I'm definitely doing the press conference, Grace said firmly. I'm not running. I'm not letting Hayes use me as an excuse to hurt people who've protected me. Catherine appeared with a phone. Senator Hayes' interview just started. You should watch. She pulled up a live stream on her tablet. Senator Jonathan Hayes sat in a television studio looking distinguished and serious in a Navy suit. The interviewer, a veteran journalist named Robert Mitchell, wasted no time getting to the central question. Senator Hayes, this morning you announced that you have a witness in the Newark weapons trafficking case. Multiple sources have identified this witness as Grace Martinez, a single mother who came under the protection of alleged crime boss Dante Moretti. Can you confirm that Ms. Martinez is cooperating with your investigation? Hayes' expression was grave. Robert, I can tell you that we have credible testimony about illegal weapons moving through Newark. As for Ms. Martinez specifically, I'm deeply concerned about her welfare. This is a woman who witnessed a serious federal crime, and within hours, she was claimed as property by one of the very criminals she could testify against. That's not protection. That's captivity with a prettier name. Grace's jaw tightened. Hayes made it sound like she was being held hostage. Mitchell pressed forward. But has Ms. Martinez actually agreed to testify? Have you spoken with her directly? I've reached out through her attorney, Hayes said smoothly. And I've made it clear that we can offer her genuine protection, the kind that doesn't come with strings attached to organized crime. Ms. Martinez deserves to make her choices free from intimidation. Unfortunately, when a woman is surrounded by armed guards employed by a criminal organization, it's hard to say her choices are truly free. So you're suggesting Moretti is forcing her cooperation? I'm suggesting that Ms. Martinez is in an impossible situation. She witnessed a crime. She was then immediately claimed by the very people who should be most afraid of her testimony. And now she's being presented to the world as if she chose this arrangement voluntarily. I think any reasonable person would question whether true consent is possible under those circumstances. Grace felt anger rising in her chest. Hayes was painting her as a helpless victim with no agency, no ability to make her own decisions. He was doing exactly what Marcus used to do, telling the world what she really wanted, what she really needed, without ever asking her directly. He's good, Dante murmured, watching the interview. He's not accusing you of anything, not insulting you. He's positioning himself as your potential savior while making me look like your captor. It's a smart play. It's a lie, Grace shot back. I'm not his damsel in distress. Catherine checked her watch. 3 minutes until we go live. Grace, remember, you're not attacking Hayes personally. You're simply stating your own truth and your own choices. Let him look like the one who doesn't believe women can make their own decisions. The interview continued. Mitchell asked, "Senator, what happens if Ms. Martinez refuses to testify?" Hayes leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Then I'll respect that decision, even though I believe it would be the wrong one. Not just for the case against Moretti, but for Ms. Martinez herself. No woman should feel obligated to protect the people who've essentially taken her prisoner. But if she chooses silence, I'll still fight to ensure her safety through every legal means available. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about winning a case against Dante Moretti. This is about a woman and her child deserving to live without fear." "Time," Catherine announced. "We're on." Grace's heart hammered as Catherine led her through a side door into the hotel ballroom. The lights were blinding. Dozens of cameras pointed at the podium like weapons. The crowd of reporters erupted in questions the moment they saw her, creating a wall of sound that was almost physical in its intensity. Catherine held up her hands for silence. "Ms. Martinez will make a brief statement and then she'll take a few questions. Please hold all questions until she's finished her prepared remarks." Grace stepped up to the podium, gripping its edges to keep her hands from shaking. She looked out at the sea of faces, some curious, some sympathetic, some openly skeptical. She found the red lights on the cameras and focused on those instead, imagining she was talking directly to other women watching at home, women who'd been in impossible situations and made hard choices. "My name is Grace Martinez," she began, and was relieved to hear her voice come out steady and clear. "2 nights ago, I witnessed something I shouldn't have seen while walking home from my job at Fletcher's Diner. What happened after that has been reported extensively, but much of what's been said doesn't reflect my truth or my choices. So I'm here tonight to speak for myself." She paused, gathering her thoughts exactly as Catherine had coached her. "Senator Hayes said in his interview tonight that I'm being held captive by organized crime. That's not true. I'm here of my own free will. No one is forcing me to say these words or make these choices. In fact, I was offered multiple options, including the witness protection that Senator Hayes mentioned, and I made my decision based on what I believe is best for my daughter and myself." The reporters were scribbling furiously. Grace continued, "I will not be testifying about what I saw 2 nights ago. This is not because I'm afraid, and it's not because anyone is preventing me from speaking. It's because I've evaluated my options carefully with the help of my attorney, and I've chosen the path that provides the best combination of safety and stability for my family. Senator Hayes wants to paint this as a choice between freedom and captivity, but the reality is more complicated than that." Grace's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "For 3 years, I lived in fear of my abusive ex-husband. I had a restraining order that didn't protect me. I had police reports that didn't stop him from following me. I had a system that was supposed to help me but instead made me feel like I was invisible, like my safety didn't matter as long as the paperwork was filed correctly. 2 nights ago, for the first time in 3 years, someone asked me who hurt me, and then took action to ensure that person could never hurt me again. My ex-husband is leaving New Jersey permanently. That's not theoretical protection, that's real, immediate safety." She could see the reporters reacting, their expressions shifting as they processed this information. "I'm not asking anyone to approve of how that safety was achieved. I'm not asking anyone to condone illegal activity or organized crime. I'm simply stating the facts of my situation. The system that Senator Hayes represents failed to protect me for 3 years. An alternative system provided protection within 24 hours. Those are the facts I used to make my decision." Grace took a breath, approaching the most important part of her statement. "Senator Hayes said that no woman should feel obligated to protect people who've taken her prisoner. I agree completely, but the inverse is also true. No woman should be pressured to testify against people who've protected her, just because a politician needs that testimony for his case. My decision not to cooperate with Senator Hayes' investigation is not about protecting criminals. It's about protecting myself and my daughter from becoming collateral damage in someone else's political war." The room was completely silent now. Even the reporters had stopped writing, hanging on her every word. "I want to be clear about one more thing," Grace said, her voice firm. "I'm grateful to Senator Hayes for his concern about my welfare. I believe he genuinely wants to help me, but I'm a grown woman who is capable of evaluating my own situation and making my own choices. When Senator Hayes suggests that my choices aren't truly free, because I'm surrounded by Dante Moretti's security, he's implying that I'm too weak or too scared to know my own mind. That's the same thing my abusive ex-husband used to say, that I didn't really know what was good for me. that I needed him to make decisions for me. I left that relationship specifically to reclaim my own agency. I'm not giving it up now." Grace looked directly into the camera. "To every woman who's ever been told she can't make her own choices, I see you. I've been you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is choose the protection that actually works, even if it doesn't look the way others expect. My choice may not be right for everyone, but it's right for me and my daughter. That's all that matters." The room erupted. Reporters shouting, cameras flashing. Catherine stepped forward to moderate. "Ms. Martinez, are you saying Senator Hayes is wrong to pursue this investigation?" Grace remained calm. "We have different views of what justice requires. I respect his position, and I ask that he respect mine." "Are you romantically involved with Dante Moretti?" someone called. "No," Grace said simply. "He's been a protector, not a partner. This isn't a love story. It's survival." "And what about the weapons you witnessed?" another pressed. "My moral obligation is to keep my daughter safe. I've made my choice. I only ask that it be respected." Catherine ended the session as Grace left the podium, legs trembling from the adrenaline. But she'd done it, stood before the world and claimed her own agency. Dante was waiting backstage, visibly impressed. "That was remarkable. You told a senator you don't need saving and made it sound noble. Catherine, did you write that?" "The message was mine," Catherine admitted, smiling. But most of those words were pure Grace. Grace sank into a chair. "What happens now?" "Now the city reacts," Dante said. "Hayes will respond. The media will dissect every word. But you've shown everyone you're not a victim, you're a woman making impossible choices. People relate to that." Tommy appeared. "We should move. Protesters outside, Hayes supporters, nothing violent yet." "Back entrance," Dante ordered. "Get her and Emma to the safe house." On the drive, Grace's phone buzzed with a text. "You were magnificent tonight. Be proud. A friend." She realized it must be the homeless man who'd once helped her escape, the message strangely grounding her amid the chaos. Outside, she saw her face on TV screens and phones. Grace made her choice trending. She'd wanted visibility, and now she had it. She just had to live with it. When they reached the brownstone, a strange calm settled over her. Not safety, not happiness. Freedom. For the first time in years, she wasn't invisible or afraid. She was free to make her own choices, and to live with them. At the door, Dante said quietly, "Get some rest. Hayes won't let this go." "I know," Grace replied. "But tonight I said no to a United States senator, and the world heard me. That's enough." Inside, Emma slept peacefully amid coloring books and toys. Grace stroked her daughter's hair, wondering what she'd think of all this someday. Pride? Shame? She didn't know. But she knew this. She'd give Emma the safety and stability she never had, even if it meant being judged or misunderstood forever. She was Grace Martinez. She'd survived Marcus Sullivan. She'd survived Dante Moretti. And now she would survive Senator Hayes, and anyone else who tried to control her story. The woman who'd been invisible for 3 years was invisible no more, and she wasn't disappearing again. Grace woke to Emma's screams. She ran to her daughter's room, heart pounding. Emma sat up, crying and pointing at the window. "Mommy, a man was looking at me." Grace froze. They were on the second floor. No one could reach that window, unless they used a ladder. Tommy burst in with guards, gun drawn. "Get back!" He checked outside, then said into his radio, "Breach, south side second floor. Subject's gone, but left something." Grace hugged Emma tightly. "You're safe," she whispered, though she didn't believe it. Someone had breached Dante's security, and wanted her to know they could. Minutes later, Dante arrived, fury in his eyes. Tommy was photographing a photo taped to the glass. Emma at her school playground. Across it, red letters read, "Witnesses have accidents too. Pack your things," Dante ordered. "We're moving now." "The Castellanos," he said when Grace demanded answers. "They're warning us. Your press conference made them nervous." Catherine rushed in. "Grace, this changes everything. They're threatening Emma. We can move you by morning." "No," Grace said firmly. "Running is what they want. Either I vanish and Hayes blames Dante or I testify and destroy him. I'm not giving them that." Dante's tone softened. "Grace, this isn't pride. They just threatened your daughter." "Then show them touching Emma means war," she said coldly. Dante met her eyes. "I wasn't lying when I said you were safe." He called, "Vincent, it's Moretti. Tell Castellano this meeting isn't a request." The warehouse in Newark was neutral ground. Grace insisted on coming. "They threatened my daughter," she told Dante. "I need to look them in the eye." Across from them, Vincent Castellano sat. Silver hair, cold eyes. You called this meeting, Moretti. Talk. Someone threatened a child, Dante said. Was it you? Castellano's voice was calm. And if it was, then you're threatening me, Dante replied. Grace spoke up. I haven't contacted law enforcement. I kept my word. Castellano studied her. But you went on TV. You turned yourself into a symbol. That attracts attention, and attention brings problems. You should have thought of that before you threatened my daughter. Grace shot back. Do it again, and I'll go straight to Senator Hayes with everything I know. Tension filled the air. Then Castellano chuckled. You've got spine. No wonder he's protecting you. He sighed. It wasn't me. My nephew Antonio acted alone. I broke his arm when I found out. Nobody threatens children. Grace demanded assurance. Leave us alone and I stay silent. Touch my daughter again and I expose everything. You're bluffing, Castellano said. Try me, she replied. After a long pause, Castellano nodded. We have an understanding. But if Moretti falls, you fall too. When he left, Grace trembled. Dante studied her. That was either brave or reckless. It was necessary, she said. They needed to see I'm not helpless. As they drove back through Newark's empty streets, Grace reflected. She'd faced a mafia boss and a U.S. senator in the same week, and she and Emma were still alive. Dante broke the silence. You realize you can never testify now? If you go to Hayes, Castellano will think you broke your word. I know, Grace said. That's what I wanted. No escape routes, only choices. She turned to him. You let me speak for myself. That matters. Back at the safe house, Grace watched her sleeping daughter. She hadn't found peace, but she had found certainty. She'd chosen her side, and burned every bridge but one. Tomorrow the world would whisper that Grace Martinez met with the Castellanos and lived. But Grace wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't waiting to be saved. She was the woman who defied a senator, negotiated with the mafia and turned fear into power. And she was just getting started.